Creepsville Chronicles presents The Cursed Nahual Hill. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, comment, and share this story. There is an area on my ranch called High Hill. It's uncultivated land, ownerless, scarcely explored, where few dare to walk. In this place, there's a great variety of incredible and unknown animals, such as elves, witch consorts, and worst of all, some Nahual or hybrid beast. That's where this story I want to tell you begins. In a very humble little town in the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, a handsome young man fell in love with a pretty girl from the community, and they decided to build their life together. Over the years, they had 2 children. At first, this marriage was very happy, and they lacked for nothing, even though the husband never worked. It was strange because this man always had money, and the family, despite being humble, lacked for nothing. They had a huge farm where every morning there were more chickens, turkeys, pigs, and a plethora of animals and sacks of grains and cereals, as if they multiplied on their own. The woman always noticed that her strange husband left their home at nightfall, especially on full moon nights. He wouldn't tell her, and since she didn't want her husband to get angry, she would go back to sleep thinking he had some business in the woods with the sale of animals. Years passed, and the woman never found him suspicious. This man slept during the day because he kept mysteriously going out every night towards the woods. Eventually, this worried the submissive woman, especially because he didn't carry a machete or anything to defend himself. In fact, it seemed like he didn't like them, and they even scared him. When the children grew up, this man began to wake them up at night and ask them to accompany him to the woods, pretending he wanted to show them something. The woman, not very comfortable or convinced, agreed because she was afraid her husband would scold her or worse, hit her. She would ask the children secretly why he took them and what they did when they returned in the early morning, carrying animals and sacks of corn, but it was in vain. They didn't say anything. Something was wrong, and she wondered what was happening because she heard the children no longer wanted to go with their father. She decided to investigate her husband's whereabouts because it was strange that after more than 10 years of marriage, he didn't have a steady job. So, one night, like almost every Friday before midnight, the husband left without saying goodbye and headed towards the woods, disappearing into the dark mountains among the cornfields until he was lost from sight. The woman began to follow him, but he was so fast that she lost sight of him. Surprised, she wanted to go back home, but at that moment, something approached her. It was like a huge animal whose footsteps sounded like it was crushing plants and dry branches of trees. From the woods emerged a huge black dog with impressive muscles, huge claws, and a grotesque jaw that never took its eyes off her. Terrified, she couldn't run, thinking that this giant dog mixed with a wolf would devour her. It gave her a deathly look and then, with 2 leaps, disappeared from there. Incredibly, she lived to tell the tale. With fear, the poor woman returned home, praying to God that nothing would happen to her husband. She couldn't sleep all night until she heard he had returned and was carrying some chickens and more rabbits that he had apparently hunted, but she didn't dare say anything. They lived comfortably thanks to the sale of meat and animals he hunted because people bought everything from them, and somehow, they survived. That dawn, the husband also brought 2 sacks of beans and corn. Who knows how he carried them, but he placed them in the kitchen and, seeing her, exclaimed angrily, "This is the last time you spy on me. It's for your own good. I don't want you to follow me again. Because just like you see these animals dead, you will suffer the same fate. Understood?" Terrified by her husband's attitude, she lowered her head and said nothing. At that moment, he had changed so much that she no longer recognized the man she loved and had joined her life with. She fell asleep and forgot everything she had experienced. The husband continued to do the same thing and forced the young children to follow him, even though they no longer wanted to go because they were a little scared. Worried that something bad might happen, the woman gathered her courage and asked her children, pleading with them to tell her if their father forced them to do bad things. Fearfully, they replied that they no longer wanted to go with him because he took them every night to a cemetery and made them dig up corpses, giving them bones to play with while he returned. They said, "He forces us to play with the bones of the dead and then leaves us, because he claims that this is how this ritual begins. He's gone for a long time, Mom, but before that, they're in the darkness. We hear him fall to the ground and roll in the dirt, and it sounds like he's fighting with someone or something very big because it sounds very bad. We're not afraid. It seems like we're used to this." Hours pass, and when he supposedly finishes working, he comes back loaded with animals and asks us to help him and brings us back home before dawn. "We don't want to go anymore because we're very tired for school, Mom." The woman was upset by this confession and thought about confronting him, but she knew her husband was violent and could hit her. She decided to remain silent, waiting for the right moment to do something, but soon, the people in the town were uneasy and began to complain that they were missing animals every day: cows, pigs, chickens, goats, and everything. The worst part was that in some cases, other animals were found eaten up and without a drop of blood, as if a wolf had torn them apart. This was getting out of hand, and a brave peasant decided to hunt down that fierce wolf that was killing his animals. One night, this brave hunter hid in the treetop where the beast always attacked his animals, waiting impatiently until he heard something big and fast approaching from the woods. This thing appeared, and it was impressive, resembling a black dog with a hybrid cross of a human and a wolf. This monster walked on two legs and began to devour one of his goats. In seconds, the terrified peasant said a prayer, blessed his bullets, and tremblingly loaded his gun, entrusting himself to God the Father. He fired the weapon, hitting this beast in the chest. At that moment, this hybrid being writhed in pain and let go of its prey. In minutes, it stopped moving because the shot was accurate. The poor peasant, terrified, climbed down from the tree and approached the corpse of the beast. With horror, he saw that it had returned to its human state. He recognized that it was a neighbor from the top of the hill, the man from the young marriage, because in a small town, almost everyone knew each other. He realized that this miserable being had done so much harm over the years that he paid dearly for his sins. It dawned quickly, and the peasant went up the hill to give the unpleasant news to the now widow and informed her to go pick up the corpse or what was left of that despicable being before the town found out and raised the entire family. As best she could, the woman paid to have the body picked up and didn't ask anything because she already knew what her husband was, and even in death, she feared him. She bought a humble coffin and began to wake him up at her house. Few people attended the funeral because almost no one liked the dead man because, despite not knowing what he was, as a human being, he was despotic and evil to everyone. When the funeral began, a strong gust of wind blew out the candles inexplicably, the light went out, a cold chill invaded the house, they couldn't light the candles, and they were in the darkness. Something unpleasant was happening by God. At the door, a strange wail accompanied by a loud thud was heard. When finally the lights came on, they discovered with horror that the dead man was no longer there. Something or someone had taken him out of the coffin and prevented this demon Nahual hybrid, Pactado con Lucifer, from touching the cemetery. Now the woman understood why the children played with bones. It was because they had to fight death in the future because it wouldn't let them rest in peace so easily, especially in a sacred place. She knew then that her husband was Nahual, and her children, by inheritance, were too. If they didn't leave the town, they wouldn't live to tell the tale. As best she could, she took some clothes, abandoned the funeral, and disappeared never to return. Some say they moved to another town in Oaxaca to start a new life and forget the shame of being the family of the imposing Nahual and wait in the future to find out if their children would continue with this terrifying cursed and hereditary gift, with fear and the burden of having been the wife of a Nahual. If you liked this video, subscribe for more, and don't forget to leave your creepy like.